The sky burns red, the skies over Theon wept fire. Explosions flared like dying suns as orbital defense stations collapsed under sustained Vakari bombardment. Great plumes of metal and flame spiraled through the clouds, raining debris onto the already scorched earth. Beneath this apocalypse, a single ridge remained cracked, smoking, but still standing, and at its edge stood Captain Iron Vance, shoulders squared against the chaos, eyes fixed on the horizon that no longer held any mercy. Didn't blink as the remains of an orbital platform screamed overhead, a twisted meteor of mankind's last defenses. He had seen worse. In fact, he had survived worse. Behind him, the bastion, a decaying military outpost once meant for training recruits, had become a symbol of final resistance. Its automated turrets clicked lifelessly, drained of energy cells. Its shields flickered, like dying stars. And yet, within its broken walls, something unkillable still lived. Humans. War had robbed them of peace, of comfort, of certainty, but not of defiance. Among the ash, they gathered like embers ready to burn bright one last time. No reinforcements were coming. No glorious salvation awaited. This stand was their own, and Iron Vance knew in his marrow that it had to matter. Lieutenant Myra Kalin stepped beside him, face streaked with blood and soot. Her armor, pieced together from 3 separate battlefield kits, buzzed faintly with kinetic shielding. "Multiple dropships incoming," she said. "We count 7 on thermal, maybe more." "Heavies? How long?" Vance asked, without looking away from the sky. 3 minutes. Maybe less if they boost. Good. He lifted his pulse rifle and checked the chamber. Functional, reliable, old, like him. "Captain," Mira added carefully, "our numbers don't quote me statistics." Lieutenant Vance cut her off. "The Vakari don't fear numbers. They fear resolve. Let's make them afraid again." Down the ridge, the Vakari transports broke through the smog-sleek predatory vessels painted in bone-white plating with luminous green cores pulsing at their centers. They dropped low, by incoming fire, and hovered inches above the soil before disgorging their troops. The Vakari were not mindless beasts. They were a coalition of engineered war species muscle-bound enforcers. Serpentine scouts, telepathic tacticians, all genetically tailored to suppress, dominate, and enslave. To them, humans were fragile anomalies, barely evolved, primitive. But the Vakari had made one fatal miscalculation. They'd mistaken endurance for weakness. "Eyes up," Vance roared. "This is our world. Make them earn every inch." The humans braced. When the first Vakari hit the dirt, the battlefield erupted. Flame and thunder screamed from behind shattered barricades. Gun barrels glowed red-hot from overuse. Explosives lit the broken terrain like a festival of death. Bodies both human and alien rose, and fell again. The line held. Vance moved like a storm through the chaos. He snapped off 3 shots at a charging Vakari warhound, each hit sending cracks through its chitinous armor. It didn't go down until he planted his boot on its head and drove a blade through its eye. Blood black and steaming splashed across his visor. To his right, Mira was pulling a wounded recruit behind a smoking vehicle hull. Her fingers glowed as she injected nanite foam into the soldier's chest. The boy's breaths evened out. She looked up. "We're thinning out too fast." "We hold," Vance growled. "We hold." Another transmission crackled in his earpiece, distorted by interference. "Captain Vance, this is US Resolute. We have a narrow strike window. If you can disable the Vakari surface relay, we can bombard their transports from orbit." Vance grimaced. That relay was buried deep in enemy territory, protected, fortified, swarming with guards. A suicide mission. But then again, survival had never been promised. He tapped his cum, acknowledged. "Resolute, stand by." Turning back to his team, he signaled for command. Mira's brow furrowed. "You're not serious." "I am." "Iron, if we leave now we buy this planet a future," he interrupted, voice calm but still laced. "You want to wait here and die, or go down taking something important with us?" Silence fell, not hesitation, acceptance. He looked at his team, a demolitionist with half an arm, a sniper using borrowed gear, to teenagers who'd never even seen space before this war. Not a perfect unit, but they were his, and they were willing. "Get ready," he said. "We're hitting back." A ripple of energy rocked the ridge as a Vakari cannon ship opened fire. The crater it left behind was 10 meters wide. The ground turned to glass. Dust blew through the air like fog, thick and choking. But Vance didn't flinch. He reached down, pulled a broken Vakari blade from the ground, and held it up, jagged black, still humming. "We're going to shove this into their heart." The strike team gathered their gear, each one moving with the quiet precision of people who had already made peace with death. There would be no second attempt, no reinforcements, just this one mad charge into enemy lines, and the slim hope that sacrifice might birth survival. Above, the skies screamed as human and Vakari ships continued their brutal ballet. But down on the surface, amid smoke and fire, a smaller war was brewing, fierce, desperate, and human to its core. And somewhere deep inside that chaos, something awakened, not hope, not strategy, will, human will. The kind that turns lost battles into legends. The kind that carves stories into the bones of history. Into the maw of fire, the sun had long vanished behind a curtain of ash and smoke. What little light remained flickered from the flames of ruined vehicles and burning forest canopies as Captain Eron Vance led his strike team into the valley of broken machines. Each footstep was heavy with the weight of purpose and the knowledge that few, if any, would return. They were 6 in total, each one marked by war in some indelible way. Myra Callan walked at Eron's side, her visor cracked but functional, a scavenged Vakari pistol slung at her hip. Behind them trudged Dren, the demolitions expert with burns across half his face and a permanent limp that didn't stop him from carrying twin explosive satchels. Griggs, the oldest of the group, carried a high-caliber sniper rifle with no scope. He preferred to feel the shot. And then there were the twins, Nico and Sam Burley, 19 brothers in both blood and battle, their armor still carrying the paint of their fallen squad. Their destination was the Vakari surface relay, a communication spire that jutted from the ground like a jagged fang. It broadcast orders, monitored human movements, and called in reinforcements. As long as it stood, the Resolute couldn't get a clean strike without being countered from orbit. To reach it, they had to cross the scorched corridor, a hellish wasteland patrolled by drone striders, automated gun nests, and Vakari foot patrols that never slept. "This is death," Nico muttered under his breath as they crouched behind a half-crushed human tank husk, watching a scout drone hum overhead. Mira said softly, "This is what you do so others get to live." Dren adjusted the straps on his pack. "Besides," he added, grinning grimly, "if we do it right, they'll name schools after us." Eron didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. He watched the patrols, counted their steps, studied their patterns. Timing was everything. "Now," he whispered. They moved like ghosts, down the crater slope, across the debris field, beneath the scanning beams of 3 circling drones, through collapsed bunkers and shattered roadways, ducking between burning ruins and melted stone. They slipped forward under the veil of smoke and desperation. The Vakari didn't expect this. No one would be mad enough to attack forward into their territory while a full-scale orbital battle raged above. But madness was a cousin to courage, and humans had long since welcomed both into their bloodline. They reached a pipeline trench, rusted and steaming with thermal runoff. Eron signaled a stop. Across from them, perhaps 50 meters ahead, the base of the communication spire loomed, black metal, angular, humming with unearthly energy. It was surrounded by a dozen Vakari sentries, 3 crawler mechs, and an overhead watchtower pulsing with sensor lights. Mira's breath hitched. "We'll never get close without a distraction." Griggs raised his hand. "I can take out the tower spotter." "One shot, no silencer," Eron reminded. Griggs simply smiled. "Don't need one. You'll be moving by the time the sound reaches them." Eron nodded. The plan wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good. But it was enough. Griggs took his position, lining up the sight with calm precision. He exhaled slowly. Then Dash cracked at the spotter's head, burst in a plume of blue blood and broken glass. Alarms shrieked immediately, and searchlights roared to life, cutting through the smoke like blades. But Eron and his team were already sprinting. They hit the outer guards hard and fast. Mira slid beneath a Vakari lancer's strike, planted her knee into its midsection, and drove her blade through its ribs. Dren lobbed a flash charge into the mech's visual range, blinding them with a pop of light that fractured their targeting optics. The twins moved as one. Nico tackled a sentry, too, the ground, while Sam silenced its cries with a stab to the throat. Eron surged up the side of a barricade and tackled the Vakari commander, crushing its spine beneath the weight of his momentum and armor. Then came the hard part. Dren darted forward under cover of suppressive fire and planted his charges at the base of the relay. 3 minutes, he shouted. "We blow this thing in 3. More Vakari poured in from the southern quadrant. An energy beam struck near Eron's foot, vaporizing part of the rock and nearly toppling him. Sam caught a glancing shot to the shoulder but kept firing. The strike team formed a perimeter around Dren as he armed the last set of charges. The mechs recovered and advanced again, pounding the ground with massive strides. One of them locked onto Myra, launching a shoulder-mounted seeker drone. She turned, eyes wide. I can't outrun it. Iron moved before thinking. He tackled her off the platform just as the drone impacted, the explosion tossing them like broken dolls. They hit the ground hard. Iron's vision blurred. His ears rang, the world spinning. Mira's voice was distant, as if underwater, but he could feel her shaking him, pulling him back to clarity. Captain, they're closing in. He rolled over and forced himself to his feet. Blood dripped from his forehead into one eye. No time for pain. Nico Sam cut north and flanked that turret. Griggs covered Dren, Myra me. The seconds bled away like sand through shaking fingers. Dren stood, detonator in hand, grinning through his cracked visor. Ready, Iron looked to the sky. The Resolute's silhouette appeared through the clouds, its engines glowing brighter. Boom. The world split apart. The relay tower erupted into fire, the shockwave flattening everything within 20 meters. Vakari were flung like ragdolls, their screams drowned by the blast. The signal was gone just like that dot from orbit. The Resolute opened fire. Massive orbital cannons rained hell upon the Vakari transports now cut off from coordination. Ships exploded mid-air. Others plummeted from the sky like falling stars. The tide had shifted. But on the ground, surrounded by smoke and the rubble of their success, Iron and his team stood alone and battered, bleeding, but victorious, and still breathing. The price of victory smoke coiled into the sky like serpents mourning the dead. Where the Vakari communication relay had once pierced the heavens, there now remained only twisted, wreckage burning, blackened, and broken. The shockwave had cracked the earth, leaving a crater filled with sparking debris and twitching Vakari limbs. The air tasted of scorched metal and burnt flesh. Captain Iron Vance stood near the epicenter, knees trembling but locked, staring at the remains around him. Silence reigned for a moment, a terrible, sacred hush in the wake of destruction. That then came the moaning. Human, wounded, Mira. Iron shouted, turning toward the rubble. She emerged from the smoke, limping, one leg armored in melted polyweave, the other soaked in blood. Still standing, she said through gritted teeth. More or less. Griggs dragged himself out from behind a collapsed beam, coughing up dust. Dren didn't make it. Iron's heart sank, but he nodded slowly. Dren had known what he was doing. They all had armed the last charge by hand, knowing the countdown would leave no time to retreat. The cost had been paid. The relay was gone, but the Warther War was far from over. Check the twins, Iron said. They found Nico unconscious beneath a chunk of debris, armor cracked, but breathing. Sam had taken shrapnel to the side. He was still awake, barely, his fingers stained crimson as he held his wound closed. Did we do it? He asked weakly. Iron knelt beside him. We did. You held the line. Sam's lips twitched in a smile before his eyes rolled back. Mira, patch him. She didn't wait for the order. With shaking hands, she injected a biofoam pack into Sam's armor seal and began whispering to him words Iron couldn't hear. Maybe she was praying, or maybe she was just begging the universe to spare one more life. Above them, the skies trembled as EU's Resolute tore through orbit. With the relay disabled, its cannons now found their targets with surgical precision. Vakari carriers exploded in clusters, some mid-descent, others while still circling for attack. The tides of war had shifted but not broken, not yet. A crackled in Iron's ear. Captain Vance, this is Commander Rios. Outstanding work on the ground. We're pushing them back, but there's a complication. Multiple Vakari warships have just warped in from deep space. A second fleet. Massive signatures. Iron's face darkened. Reinforcements, exactly. And they're not just heading for orbit, they're making planetfall. Iron looked up. Faint shadows moved across the clouds, growing larger by the second. Pull out, Rios urged. We'll do what we can from orbit, but we won't be able to hold them all off. You need to fall back to Bastion Point if it still stands. Copy, Iron said, voice tight. But we're not retreating, we're going to slow them down. Myra looked at him sharply. You're talking about the ravine? He nodded. The ravine was a natural bottleneck, a jagged canyon half a kilometer wide that separated the valley from the path to Bastion Point. If they could reach it first and hold it, they could delay the advancing army, maybe long enough for the fleet to regroup, but it would mean facing the main force. Sam stirred as they prepped to move. What's next? Iron gripped his shoulder. Now, we buy the future. They moved fast. Despite wounds and exhaustion, the terrain was broken and treacherous, blackened by war. They carried what they could: pulse rifles, charges, plasma, grenades, no extra ammo, no backup. only fire in their blood and grit in their bones. By the time they reached the edge of the ravine, the sun, or what little filtered through the burning sky, was low. The canyon stretched out before them like a wound in the earth, flanked by jagged cliffs and crumbled bunkers. Ancient battle-scarred trenches still remained from a war long forgotten, and now they would bleed again. Iran positioned his team in the rocks above the narrow pass. Myra laid proximity mines along the lower ridge. Griggs found a vantage point on the cliffside. Nico kept lookout, eyes wide, helmet cracked. Sam rested against a boulder, pale but defiant. "We don't let them through," Iran said quietly. "We fight until we can't. Then we make sure they remember who we were." Griggs grunted. "Sounds like a suicide pact." "No," Iran said. "It's a message." They waited in silence, and then thunder. The sound wasn't weather, it was weight. Metal weight. Footsteps, war machines. Dozens of Vakari soldiers poured into view, towering brutes. Armored beasts with glowing visors and double-barreled cannons for arms. Behind them marched lines of conscripted alien species, mind-controlled or subjugated into the Vakari ranks. Veronians, Thelix, even old Earth-descended mercs, long thought lost, and among them, a towering figure cloaked in ceremonial red armor. Warlord Iran's blood ran cold, but his trigger finger was steady now. The first mines exploded, shredding the front line. Screams echoed as limbs flew and metal crumpled. Griggs fired shot after shot, cracking skulls and armor alike. Myra tossed grenades with deadly rhythm. Nico fired from the ledge. Covering his wounded brother, the Vakari surged forward in fury, and the humans did not budge. Wave after wave came. Mechs clanked through rubble. Mortar rained down from Vakari artillery. Fire lit the ravine walls, casting monstrous shadows against stone. Still, Iran held the line. His armor sparked with damage. His rifle hissed as its barrel overheated, but he didn't flinch. He threw down his empty weapon and picked up a Vakari spear, using it to skewer a charging enemy through the chest and then parry another with fluid rage. "Captain!" Mira screamed. He turned and saw the warlord closing in, massive, armored, its hammer glowing with heat. Iran braced himself. Then, from the cliff above, Sam leaped down, one arm bleeding, the other holding a charged grenade. He landed on the warlord's back, shouted one last word for Earth, and triggered the detonation. The blast tore the warlord's shield apart and sent both bodies flying. Iran scrambled toward the wreckage, falling to his knees beside what was left of the Vakar beast. Sam's armor was shattered. His chest didn't rise. "Damn it," Iran whispered that he wanted to scream, to break, but instead, he stood, because the line had not fallen, and as the second wave prepared to descend, Iran knew this was only the beginning. Fire in the blood, the battlefield smoked with pain and sacrifice. Captain Iran Vance stood in the ashes, Sam's broken body still warm against the blackened stone. There wasn't time to mourn, no words to ease the tightness in his chest. The second wave was already forming on the far ridge. Columns of armored Vakari reforming like a sea of steel and bone. Myra's voice was raw, barely a whisper. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. If he did, the grief would swallow him whole. And they weren't done yet. "Set the second line," Aaron said, voice flat but firm. "Dren's packs, the last two." Griggs limped forward, his shoulder seeping blood through torn armor. "They're damaged. I'll need to rig them manually. You've got 5 minutes." Griggs coughed out a dark laugh. "Give me 3. Nico sat beside his brother's body, helmet off, eyes red, hands clenched so tight they bled. Iran knelt beside him, placing one hand on the boy's shoulder. "You saw him," Iran said. "He didn't hesitate." "I should have known," Iran cut him off. "He made a choice. Now you have one too." Nico looked up, jaw trembling. "I want them to burn, then stand. We finish this." The ravine, once a quiet geological scar in the heart of Theon, was now a graveyard. Dozens of Vakari bodies littered the pass. Their exo-armor cracked open, their weapons still glowing. But they were learning. The second wave was moving slower, more careful, covering angles, scanning for traps. The humans had lost the element of surprise. Griggs finished wiring the detonators to the backup charges. "These aren't elegant," he muttered, "but they'll take out another 5 dozen if we get them close enough. We'll draw them in," Iran said. "Set the trigger. Fall back to the third shelf." As they repositioned, Mira collapsed. To one knee, her leg gave out. "You're bleeding out," Iran said, catching her. "Just muscle," she lied, voice shaking. "Pain's good. It means I'm still alive." Iran pulled her up. "Don't be a hero. Be a problem." She smirked through bloodied teeth. "That I can do." The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long over the canyon walls. Then, just as silence tried to reclaim the air, the Vakari came again, but this time, they were different. Iron's eyes narrowed. At the center of their formation, protected by 4 energy-shielded brutes, moved a creature unlike the others, taller, thinner, with silver armor etched in runes that shimmered in the light. A commander, mirror eyes on the middle unit. She squinted through her visor. That's not just a field leader, that's a tactical overseer, which means they're watching, learning. So we teach them something they'll never forget. The human team opened fire first. Energy bolts rained down from the cliffs. The Vakari responded with layered shields, their heavy troopers forming mobile cover as their lighter units advanced. A hail of plasma streaked across the ravine, scorching the earth, tearing chunks from the walls. The humans didn't retreat, not yet. They fell into formation, their movements synchronized by years of instinct and shared trauma. Myra rolled behind cover and unleashed a grenade into the charging front line, blasting 3 Vakari into the dirt. Griggs, despite his bleeding arm, picked off targets with near supernatural calm. Every shot bought seconds. Seconds were gold. Iron waited, measured, watched. When the Vakari commander reached the halfway mark, he keyed the detonator. Boom, the second wave shattered. Rocks, limbs, metal ore blasted into the air in a roar that drowned out screams. Fire engulfed half the ravine. Those who survived scattered in disarray. The commander fell to one knee, shield flickering violently. Iron didn't celebrate. Instead, he pressed the advantage. Push forward, he shouted. No mercy. They surged out from cover like devils born of fire. Mira, dragging her bad leg, fired left-handed and clipped a Vakari brute in the throat. Griggs rammed the butt of his rifle into another's eye socket, then drew his blade and finished the job. Nico tackled a wounded scout and drove his knife under its jaw, screaming as he did. The commander tried to retreat. Iron was faster. He met the creature head-on, pulse blade in one hand, a short-range disruptor in the other. Their weapons clashed, sparks lighting the dusk. The commander struck with precision fluid, honed, but Iron fought like an avalanche, brutal, unpredictable, and unstoppable. He absorbed a glancing slash, drove his disruptor into the alien's ribs, and activated it. The commander convulsed, smoke pouring from its armor. Iron stepped forward, buried his blade under its collarbone, and pulled. The body dropped. Around him, the Vakari leaderless again hesitated. Their formations broke. Some fled, others dropped their weapons and waited. The silence that followed was louder than the battle. Iron stood over the alien corpse, chest heaving, armor ruined, blood dripping from every joint. His team, what was left, gathered behind him. Nico leaned on his rifle. Mira collapsed to sit, gasping. Griggs, wounded beyond care, simply lit a cigar from a burning Vakari torch. We did it, Mira asked softly. Iron didn't answer because the sky was roaring again. A fresh storm of Vakari warships descended beyond the mountains. 3 massive cruisers, black as oil with energy cores glowing like cursed stars. He looked up. They weren't done. Get to Bastion Point, he said, hoarsely. This was the start. Myra's face fell. You're not coming with us. I'll delay them here. Someone has to. No. Iron placed a hand on her shoulder. You lead them now. Mira clenched her fists. I'm not you. Ah, he said, staring hard. You've always been. She blinked away tears, nodded once. Griggs, barely upright, coughed. Guess I'm staying too. Iron smirked. I figured. Nico hesitated, glancing toward his brother's body. Iron met his eyes. Live, that's your mission now. And so it was, as the others retreated across the scorched hills, toward Bastion. Iron and Griggs turned back to face the blackening sky. Men, battered and broken, but unyielding. No medals would follow them, no songs, only the story. Bastion's last light. The road to Bastion Point was paved in ghosts. Lieutenant Myra Kalen limped through smoke and ruin, half carrying Nico, while Griggs' final message still echoed in her Linky. The words were simple. Hold the fire. We'll light your way. But their meaning carved deep into her soul. Behind them, the ravine still burned. Captain Iron Vance and Griggs had stayed behind. A final stand. A human wall against the incoming horde. Myra had wanted to disobey, wanted to stay, but she knew Iron's look. His orders were not for debate. They were a passing of the torch. And now it was in her hands. Bastion Point lay ahead, a jagged fortress embedded into a granite mountain. Centuries old, half forgotten, and once considered obsolete. Now it was the last functioning military facility within 500 kilometers. Its turrets were cold, its walls cracked, its crew reduced to less than 40 soldiers and 10 automated drones that barely responded to command codes. But it still had walls, and they still had hope. Those inner gates powered, Myra barked as they stumbled into the lower compound. Patch me through to orbital now. A voice crackled through the dust-coated intercom. Lieutenant Kalen, this is Ensign Dal at Bastion. You're alive. Not for long unless we get those shields up, she snapped. Dal scrambled behind the command console voice, trembling as he worked. Most of the grid's fried. We've got auxiliary power, maybe just enough for the interior shield. Then that's what we use. I need every drone, turret, and cannon rigged for local defense. And I want artillery pre-targeted along the northern ridge, Lieutenant. That's where Captain Vance. I know where he is. She shouted. Silence. The kind of silence where even machines know better than to speak. Nico sat quietly nearby, cradling his brother's dog tag in one hand. His eyes weren't wide anymore, they were narrowed, sharp. There was something changed in him. He hadn't said much since the ravine. He didn't need to. Outside. The mountain trembled. A sound like thunder deep and mechanical rolled across the valley. The Vakari had arrived. Dozens of dropships began to descend from the clouds, followed by armored troop crawlers and mobile artillery walkers. Their forces stretched for miles. The cruisers in orbit fed them like gods, dropping titans onto a battlefield. Inside Bastion, humans prepared not for survival, but for resistance. Mira took a long breath as she stepped onto the command deck. She pulled the rank patch from her sleeve and pressed it against the cracked wall beside the control screen. The system barely blinked. Iron, she whispered. You better be slowing them down. Back in the ravine, the fire hadn't stopped. Captain Vance stood at the precipice with a melted blade in one hand and a half-empty plasma pack in the other. Griggs was slumped against a shattered boulder, reloading with shaking fingers. Their armor was fused, burned, and broken in every possible way, but they still stood. Vakari soldiers approached slowly now, no longer charging blindly, but watching, waiting. Something about these humans unsettled them. There were only two left, yet the mountain trembled in their presence. Aaron's body screamed with pain. His left arm was dead weight, barely hanging on, his vision blurred, but his mind remained razor-sharp. We've got one more surprise, Griggs muttered, blood dripping from his mouth. Aaron nodded toward the ridge behind them. The fuel line ruptured it 10 minutes ago. One shot, and this whole sector's gonna turn into a sun. Aaron glanced up at the sky. The largest Vakari cruiser had moved into low orbit, casting a shadow so massive it stretched from the ridgeline to the valley below. Let's give them something to remember. Griggs reached for the detonator, but Aaron stopped him. Do it. Griggs raised a brow. You always need the last word, don't you? No, Aaron said, gripping his friend's hand. I just promised I'd see it through. Griggs nodded, then leaned back and closed his eyes. The next moment, the Vakari charged and Aaron ran straight into them. He was a fury wrapped in fire, a man whose time had already been spent, wielding death like a hymn. He dropped 3 with the pulse pack before it overloaded, then a spear, then his fists. Blood, oil, metal, screams. The air filled with heat as he backpedaled toward the fractured pipe. He raised the detonator. He thought of Earth. He thought of every face he had fought beside. He thought of Myra. Click. The world disappeared. A chain reaction erupted through the ravine, engulfing it in a white-hot explosion that climbed toward the sky like a volcanic god. The shockwave cracked the nearby cliffs and lit the horizon in blinding light. The Vakari cruiser staggered in orbit, shields collapsing under the wave of raw energy and debris hurled skyward. Its hull split. Fire consumed its midsection. Then, gravity claimed it. The ship fell, not gracefully, not slowly. It screamed down in a spiral, clipping mountain peaks, tearing forests into ash, and finally crashing near Bastion Point in a plume of ruin that shook the fortress to its foundation. Bastion. Mira dropped to her knees as the monitors blinked red and sirens howled, but then, silence, and Dal whispered behind her, the cruiser's down. It sits actually down. Mira rose slowly, her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. Begin evacuation procedures. Get survivors ready to move east. While they're regrouping, we run. Dal stared. But we just won. No, Mira said, staring at the distant fire. We survived. There's a difference. Behind her, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Light touched the ruins of Bastion, and a new war began. Shadows beyond the ashes dawn over Bastion Point. Didn't look like victory, it looked like aftermath. The Vakari cruiser lay broken in the valley below, its molten wreckage still venting dark smoke into the air. Jagged pieces of its hull were scattered for miles like the bones of a slain beast. Where the earth wasn't scorched, it was cratered. Trees had turned to skeletons. The river had boiled away. Inside the mountain fortress, the survivors of the human resistance moved with quiet urgency. Lieutenant Myra Callan hadn't slept. She stood at the outer platform, staring down at the crash site with haunted eyes. There were no cheers, no celebration. Everyone knew what had been traded to bring that ship down. Captain Eron Vance Griggs, the entire team at the ravine. And yet, there was no time for grief. Bastion had been saved. Yes, but only temporarily. Scouts had already reported Vakari movement beyond the ridge. Distant signatures of more enemy dropships forming up along the far horizon. The second fleet hadn't fallen, it had only slowed, Lieutenant Dal said, stepping beside her. His uniform was wrinkled, his face pale, but his voice was steady. Civilian transports are prepped. 230 souls ready to move. We'll begin eastern extraction in 1 hour. Mira nodded. And the wounded, half stabilized. The rest, he hesitated. We don't have enough supplies for another wave. Mira closed her eyes. The ache behind them had become constant. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten something that wasn't rations or felt warmth that didn't come from fire. Nico walked up quietly, a rifle slung over his back. His movements had changed, quieter, sharper. His face was clean now, but his eyes carried something far older than his years. Perimeter reports motion, he said. Scouts. Not many. Not charging yet. They're probing, Myra said. More to herself than him. Testing our weakness. Which we have a lot of, Nico muttered. Myra turned to him. You don't have to stay here, you know. You've done more than most. I'm not leaving, he said firmly. Not while they're still out there. There was no bravado in his voice. No anger, just cold clarity. He had lost too much to walk away now. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sky. And then the comms chirped. Unknown craft entering upper orbit. Dal reported from the console. Doesn't match Vakari or human transponder codes. My heart skipped. Put it on screen. A moment later, the central display lit up. A ship hovered above the atmosphere sleek, long, metallic gold and silver. Its design was unfamiliar, not Vakari, and far too graceful to be human-built. Its engine signatures shimmered in hues she'd never seen before. First contact, Dal whispered. No, Mira muttered, staring hard. I've seen those markings before, on the battlefield. What are they? Enslaved, she said grimly. The Vakari's conscripted racers. One of the species they forced to fight. But this isn't a slave ship. This is something else. The comms flashed. An incoming signal. Dal scrambled. They're requesting a secure channel. Patch them through. The voice that came through was strange, warbled, but understandable. We are the free Varan survivors, rebels you struck. The Vakari heart at the ravine, we watched, we believed. Now we answer. Myra's breath caught. Others were rising. We offer aid. The voice continued. Supplies, fighters, information. But only if you lead. She stared at the screen. Why us? Because you stood when no one else did. Because your kind does not bend. And because the galaxy has watched you bleed. And yet, you still burn. Dal blinked. We're not alone. Myra's eyes narrowed. No, she said softly. We never were. We were just the first to stand up. A new fire lit behind her exhaustion. She turned from the screen and activated the base-wide comms. Her voice echoed through every hall, corridor, and shelter. This is Lieutenant Callan. We've survived every strike, every assault, every death they've thrown at us. We've buried our heroes. We've bled for every inch of ground. And now we rise. She took a breath, steadying her voice. There are others. They saw what we did, and they're coming to fight with us. But they're not looking for symbols. They're looking for soldiers. For people who don't give up, no matter what it costs. So whatever you've got left, Omar, weapons, your last breath, bring it. Because the next time they hit us, we won't just endure. She clenched her fist. We'll push back. Hours later, from the battered landing pad atop Bastion, Mira stood with Nico and Dal as ships descended. Not Vakari, not human but rebel craft painted in old colors of once conquered worlds. The Varan, the Thelix, even a few rogue human gunships, once presumed lost behind enemy lines. Their captains wore scars like medals. Some had chains still hanging from their limbs. Others bore the marks of rebellion, crude armor, stolen weapons, and eyes hungry for vengeance. They had come because humanity had lit the match. Now they brought their fire to join it. Mira met the Varan commander at the ramp of the first descending shuttle. He was tall, slender, and his gaze was calm but fierce. You were the one who broke the ravine, he asked. I didn't break it, she said. We held it, and Eron Vance died to make sure it meant something. De Varan gave a slow nod. Then he is legend among us now. A fresh wind swept over Bastion as the ships continued to land, each one a promise. The war wasn't over. But the galaxy was no longer silent. Humanity had shown it was possible to stand, and now, they weren't standing alone. The spark that lit the stars the night before the final assault. Bastion Point pulsed with a strange kind of energy, half warcamp, half sanctuary. Across the ravaged halls and broken chambers of the mountain stronghold, humans and alien rebels worked side by side for the first time in memory. Makeshift barricades were reinforced. Wounded tended to wounded. Tools passed between claws and fingers without hesitation. There was no language barrier, only purpose. In the mess hall mirror, Kalen studied the holographic map projected above the table. The last Vakari command node had been located deep within the ruins of Theon's ancient capital, now a gutted husk crawling with enemy forces. It was more than a tactical hub. It was a symbol. The last pillar of their planetary dominance. If it fell, so would their control over the region. But it wouldn't fall easily. They've reinforced every street and corridor, Dal said, pointing to the map. Dozens of heavy artillery positions, automated drones, breach-resistant gates. It's a fortress. We know how to break fortresses, Mira replied calmly. We've been doing it since Earth. Beside her, the Varen commander stood with arms folded across his chest. Our cloaked wings will provide air support, but the strike has to come from the ground. Our people are watching. If we take this node, more systems will rise. Nico paced silently in the background. His armor had been upgraded with alien alloy plating, gifts from the Varen. His hands, once trembling from fear, now moved with precision as he inspected his gear. We hit at dawn, Mira said. We don't stop until we stand over their last. Commander, the march to the capital was a thunder of purpose. Across blackened hills, across slagged roads and the charred skeletons of cities, the united force moved. Human soldiers marched with Thalix gunners. Varen aerial scouts flew above. Even rogue droids once enslaved to Vakari programming walked beside them, now reprogrammed to follow only the call of rebellion. And leading them all was Mira. She moved without fear now, without hesitation. She remembered the woman who had once been a field medic, afraid to lift a weapon. That woman had died the day Iron gave her the command, and what had risen in her place was fire. When they reached the outskirts of the capital, they found it as expected, fortified, vicious, burning with green light from Vakari sentry towers and defense arrays. And yet, the air didn't feel hopeless, it felt charged. Positions. Myra ordered. Dot from the cliffs. Artillery cannons unfolded like giant insect limbs. From beneath the earth, rebels emerged through old sewer tunnels, and above Varen bombers shimmered in stealth mode, waiting for the signal. Mira looked up into the sunrise. This is for Iron, she whispered. Then she raised her fist. Now the sky erupted. Explosions danced across the enemy fortifications, as Varen bombers dove, unleashing focused plasma strikes that carved the outer towers into molten spirals. The rebels poured through breaches in the walls, weapons blazing. The Vakari roared back, feral, coordinated, brutal, but they weren't prepared for unity. Mira charged the central gate, her rifle barking with fury. Nico was beside her, a whirlwind of fire and motion. The Varen commander split off toward the eastern flank, leading a team of snipers and demolition ISTs. As the humans pushed deeper, block by block, they found not just resistance but desperation. The Vakari were no longer fighting to win, they were fighting not to be erased. At the command center's final corridor, Mira and her squad found themselves face to face with the last high strategist of the Vakari on Theona, towering brute, wrapped in cybernetic armor, eyes glowing blue, multiple limbs arming a mix of tech blades and plasma rods. I have seen your kind crushed before, it hissed, and I've watched yours run, Mira shot back. The battle that followed was chaos made flesh. Mira ducked under sweeping blows, her rifle tossed aside as she fought hand to hand. Nico fired shots into the enemy's flank, his armor sparking as he took a brutal strike to the chest. The strategist moved like a monster, adapting to their attacks, faster than anything they'd faced before, but they didn't need to outmatch it, just outlast it. Myra grabbed a downed Vakari blade, charged and stabbed up through the strategist's jaw as it turned toward Nico. It screamed, a hideous mechanical sound. Then Mira fired her sidearm twice into its throat. It fell with a crash that shook the floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the node core began to flicker, and moments later, across the capital Vakari defenses collapsed. Turrets powered down, drones shut off, alarm systems silenced. One by one the enemy positions crumbled. It was over. Hours later, Mira stood at the highest balcony of the command spire, the sun rising full behind her, casting gold over the ruins. Beside her, Nico leaned on the rail, still bloodied, still breathing. Below them, flags flew, not just human ones but banners of the Varan, the Thelix, and countless others. The rebellion had become a movement. They'll try again, Nico said. You know that? Yes, Mira replied. But they'll never face us alone again. She looked toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, on distant planets and in enslaved cities, others would be watching this victory, listening for signs of hope, waiting for proof that the Vakari could bleed dark, and now they had it. She pressed her hand to the badge on her armor, Oren's old insignia, scorched and faded. You showed them what we are, she said softly, and behind her, Bastion Point shone, like a new dawn, because that's what this was, not an end, but a beginning, a spark, a signal to the stars. Humanity will not be conquered, humanity will not break, and where they stand, others will rise.